The Lagos State government, under the leadership of Babajide Sanwo-Olu, is supporting over 3,000 agripreneurs in business, 70% of which are youth and women. Here to speak on the project and what more the state is doing on the agriculture industry is the Honorable Commissioner for Agriculture, ABISOLA OLUSANYA. HC, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you.
Good morning.
All right, good morning. You're trying to produce agripreneurs. I mean, I know that you started sometimes late last year, and you're hoping that by 2023, when the first term of Mr. Governor would be done, you will have produced about 15,000 agripreneurs.
More than that, actually.
More than that. Yes. What is this about? I know that agric does not feature prominently on their themes as such, but in terms of job creation, yes, and employment generation, that comes, is that the point, to bring agric into the center stage of the themes agenda? So
agriculture actually features greatly in Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu's agenda of themes. Okay. And it features under the fourth pillar, which is making Lagos a 21st century economy. Okay. So when you talk of the budget and you look at the different constituents of that budget, we fall under the economic aspect of the themes agenda and of the budget. So agriculture actually plays a major role. Now, maybe in Lagos State, we might say agriculture doesn't feature largely because Lagos is not seen as an agrarian state. But I believe what we did on Thursday, 29th of July, 2021, at Police College shows that Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu obviously is on a different path when it comes to showcasing agriculture in Lagos State. So it's obviously part of the agenda around job creation, wealth creation, and we also know that agriculture is that one sector that can definitely get more people into the employment pool quickly. Therefore, it's a low-hanging fruit, and we are trying to utilize that around getting the youth engaged one way or the other.
I mean, you've already admitted that Lagos isn't typically known as an agrarian state, and that's because you don't have a lot of agricultural land. So how do you propose to, jump that hurdle in reaching these plans?
So yes, we might be the smallest state in Nigeria, just 3,577 square kilometers, less than 0.5% of Nigeria's landmass. But when it comes to agriculture, our areas of strength are largely in livestock, animal husbandry, as opposed to crop production. Crop production is definitely where you need more land, but animal production, you could need less, and then with a little bit of technological aid, you could actually do more with less. So yes, Lagos might not be that agrarian state in the way Nigeria is viewed, but then when you compare to countries like the Netherlands that has similar terrain as Lagos, being below sea level, the same size more or less, even Singapore, these are countries. Now Lagos is definitely a state, but then we'll still try to compare. There's definitely a sort of advantage that we still have that we can utilize. And one key area would be in the fisheries and aquaculture sector, where Lagos obviously has a lot of water bodies around and can utilize that and use it as an advantage in areas where it is lacking.
Okay, I know that, the government over time has been trying to assist in creating techpreneurs. Yes. But then you want agripreneurs. Yes. But then I guess this is just like a month training that you are doing for, and I know that you are focusing more on the youth and women. Yes. How does this work? How do you choose people? Is it based on the IBILE template or the 57 local governments and the LCDAs, and then 1 month training? How far can that go, really? Okay, so first and foremost, yes, we started with a 1 month training program, assuming that we should train more, we should churn out more, such that we could meet with the deadline, timelines, and what have you. But that 1 month has actually now changed or evolved into a 4-month training period for every batch. So you're going for a 1 month training at our facilities in Araga and Songhai. And after that, there's a 3-month internship with already existing agripreneurs. So it's one thing to be trained on the theoretical and then practical aspect. It's another thing to see a real-life business person in the agricultural space and to see what they have to go through on a day-to-day basis. In terms of the selection process of these, let's say, Lagos Agripreneurship Program students, it's not necessarily about whether across the 15 LCDAs or the IBILE division. It is more or less like we throw it open to the public.
And it is a function of, are you interested in this program? If you are interested, pick up a form, fill it, submit it to the Ministry of Agriculture. After that, we take them on a sort of sensitization program and an awareness program. After that, exams are written. There are oral interviews. There are other verbal aptitude tests that are done before the final selection is actually done. Yes, we try to cut across to make sure we cover the 57 LCDAs and LGAs, but by and large, it is on the basis of merit. If you qualify, looking at the criteria that has been set, then you will be selected for the agripreneurship program. Now, for the enterprise activation program we did on Thursday, it was picking from this pool of LAP beneficiaries, as well as looking at the Fishermen Society, looking at various other associations and cooperatives like the Catfish Association, the Pig Farmers Association, Poultry Association, and so on and so forth. What we did around selecting them was, especially for the lab beneficiaries, to pick the very best from each of the batches that we have actually trained. So for Lagos Agripreneurship Program, so far we've trained 7 batches, and from each batch we picked the very best. For the fishermen, we have...
strictly Lagos residents or anybody that just applied?
No, it has to be Lagos residents, which is where your LASTRA also applies. Okay. Yes, you have to be a Lagos resident, even for all the beneficiaries. So the 3,000 agripreneurs that Mr. Babajide Olushola Sanwo-Olu empowered on Thursday, they all have to be Lagos residents. So it's important for people to understand that for you to benefit going forward in a lot of the things that Lagos State government is doing, you should register and have your LASTRA card. It actually helps.
Is that the only?
No, that's not the only criterion. No, that's not the only criterion, but it is a prerequisite that at least for you to also benefit, you should be a registered Lagos State resident for us to know that you reside here, you're contributing economically, socially, and you're being a responsible citizen. And that way, we'll be able to account for everything that we do using taxpayers' money, and we should be able to see the returns and the benefits. So in terms of selecting the people, in terms of the beneficiaries, obviously there was a set criteria around that. So for the lab students, like I mentioned, we selected the very best after training, after the internship program. Now for the other associations, obviously we wanted to focus on associations as opposed to focusing on single farmers that would be difficult to find after the empowerment. When you work with associations, it's easier to track them, it's easier to monitor, it's easier to assess, and to also see the impact that what we have given has been able to do for the people and within the community where they are at. So when you talk of, let's say, the Lagos State Catfish Association, obviously it's easy to call their exco, let's see what you've done with what we've given you, we want to see the asset. The Lagos State Fishermen Association as well, we know all the landing sites, we know where the boats that Mr. Babajide Olushola Sanwo-Olu is giving will be going, and we should be able to see and say, okay, let's see the status of this asset, and the other associations as well. So it's actually very easy to track. And then in the next form of empowerment or enterprise activation, it will be easy also to see other members that did not benefit in this this pool for this year, and it will be easier to see others next year gaining from it. So it's easier to track, it's easier to monitor, and then, I mean, what we should be saying.
But if you're asking them to write, sorry to cut it, if you're asking them to write tests to sit, you know, for like an exam before they are taken, are you only interested in the educated farmer?
No. So you are mixing up the two. So for what we did, we have 2 sets of beneficiaries. One is mostly the youth, and that is the Lagos Agripreneurship Program. That is where you have to write exams, you have to write tests, and what have you. Now, you might say, is it necessarily that I must be educated? Obviously, even within that system, there's an evolution going on as I speak to you. Before, it was a 1-month training program, and after that, certificates are issued. Now, it evolved from that to a 1-month program and a 3-month internship program. Now, it's also evolving again, where we will now be selecting people from the graduate internship placement program of Ministry of Wealth Creation, to say we'll rather pick people from that pool as opposed to we as a Ministry of Agriculture doing another selection process, which is time consuming. Now for the GIPP pool, obviously they are mostly graduates. I mean, you have people who have postgraduate degrees, people who have BScs and what have you. Most of them would be coming from agricultural backgrounds into this pool for us to train under the lab program. But then we know agriculture is also that one sector where you can draw people who don't even have an education. So what we intend doing is to have a 70-30% balance, to say 70% of our trainees going forward will come from that GIPP pool and 30% will come from the general public, whether you have an education or not. But then it also means that the curriculum is now also going to be divided, because those who have a background in agriculture, obviously what they will be taught in that training program would definitely differ from those who don't have a training at all. And then in terms of what they have to go through in terms of practicals and what have you would also be different. So there will obviously be a difference. But what we are looking at is to have agripreneurs who already have a background in agriculture, who can scale production fast and quickly for Lagosians. It's one thing to have people who don't have a background in agriculture and you're trying to put them through the steps. It takes a longer time. We don't have that time in Lagos. Lagos needs to start to have its own food production in the capacity in which we can feed ourselves and be secure as quickly as possible. So it's like saying you have a medical doctor and you want to bring a carpenter to come and perform a surgery on someone. You wouldn't want that. So why are we taking food production differently? Why are we saying, oh, okay, it should be free and it should be for everybody and anyone? We should start engaging those who also have a background in agriculture and take them as priority. I'm not saying we won't take others as priority, but if we really want to scale up food production quickly, we should start looking at those who have a background in agriculture and help them to scale the hurdles faster.
When we're talking about scaling up businesses, I can imagine that is going to be quite expensive when you're looking about direct investment. This would be something worth hundreds of millions of naira. So when you're talking about this type of investment, is it direct cash injections? Is it the financing of tools or the education? How is that money going to be spent?
So the thing is this, it cuts across. So agriculture obviously has faced a lot of challenges in Nigeria and I think globally, but most especially in Africa. And part of the challenges we see in agriculture is financing. And the reason for that is a lot of the financial institutions, they find it difficult to invest in agriculture or to support agripreneurs because of the lack of information or the dearth or scarcity of information. And even when such information is available, to even verify is also a problem. So what we intend doing is to say, as Lagos State, under Mr. Babajide Olushola Sanwo-Olu, we'll handhold to those that we have trained. We'll put them in clusters where we can monitor, where we can provide extension services, where we can have professionals also oversee what they do, such that for whatever input we give, we know what the output will be, and we can extrapolate to say, if we give or we make available, let's say 100 million, this should be the returns on investment. That way, it's easier for banks also to begin to see that under controlled conditions, this will be the return on investment. For us as a state, what we've done obviously is not to give cash, is to give tools, to give implements, to give productive assets. So for instance, some of the lab beneficiaries, they walked away with, let's say, poultry assets. And when I mean poultry assets, so one student will walk away with 480 points of lay, which is birds. Will walk away with medication, will walk away with feed. And when you estimate that, that is almost 2 million naira per beneficiary. For those in the aquaculture sector, they walk away with 700 juveniles with medication, with feed as well. That is costing roughly about 400,000. Now, you might wonder, I am a lab beneficiary, you are a lab beneficiary. Why is one person getting almost 2 million naira and the other person getting 400,000 naira? Now, for someone in aquaculture, you can do 3 cycles of production within a year, or almost 4 cycles. So definitely the risk is less and you can churn out faster, as opposed to someone in poultry who faces higher risk because of the outbreak of zoonotic diseases like the avian flu, and obviously can only do maybe 1 cycle or maximum 1.5 cycle within that same time frame. So that is what we are doing right now, to say we'll give you the assets, we'll handhold you, we'll help you to flourish and see that your business grows, and then we move on to the next batch.
Understood. ABISOLA, thank you. ABISOLA, we are going to take a very short break. Okay. And when we come back, we will continue our discussion. Thank you for staying with us. Please do, you too, at home, stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Now, Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu has reminded farmers in the state to take advantage of the government's support programs in ensuring food sufficiency and security in a state that serves as home to more than 23 million people. Oba Adeoye reports.
Farmers in their thousands, drawn from across the 5 divisions of the state, thronged the Police College Ikeja venue of the activation program. It was an opportunity for some 3,000 farmers, especially women, youth, and vulnerable Lagosians, to get empowered with farm implement, machineries, and other agricultural inputs targeted at boosting food production in the state. Commissioner for Agriculture, Ms. ABISOLA OLUSANYA, said the activation program was designed to trigger the agricultural value chains across the state, and which in turn will bring about an increase in food production and marketing.
The focus of this year's program is primarily on 3 value chains: poultry, piggery, and fisheries, which represents the 3 subsectors mostly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the outbreak of zoonotic diseases such as the avian flu and the African swine fever. However, we have on ground other assets, as you can see, to aid other value chains like the red meat value chain, the rice value chain, and what have you.
This is what we call inclusive governance. This is what we call inclusive empowerment. Whether you are a rural farmer, or an urban farmer, or a city trader, you are here to collect the benefits of the value chain empowerment.
State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu is confident that with programs like this, Lagos should strategically transit from the state of producing just 20% of the food it consumes to a region of between 40% and 50%.
It's tiny. The size of Lagos is less than 0.5% of the size of this country. In fact, there are some states in this country that are about 25 times the size of Lagos. So yes, they might have more land to tilt, but we'll not let that define who we are. We'll not let that shortchange our people. We'll not let that set us back. We will be an agri-production state. We will ensure that as much as possible, given the resources that God has provided for us, we will feed our people, we will produce what we read, we will produce what we require, and that's why you are an important sector for us as a government.
Mr. Governor sees the opportunity to assure residents that the 32 metric tons rice mill in Imota will add so much value to food sufficiency in the state as it will produce an average of 2.4 million bags of 50 kilogram rice annually. That is apart from the projection that the rice mill will create more than 250,000 jobs for Lagosians. Farm implements, including tractors, harvesters, fishing boats, and other support inputs like herbicides and animal feed, among others, were on display to be distributed to the 3,000 beneficiaries of the activation program. A total of 13,976 beneficiaries have been empowered since the program started in October 2014. Oba Adeoye, Arise News, Lagos.
Well, thank you for that report, Oba. And we are, of course, still joined by the Honourable Commissioner of Agriculture, ABISOLA Olusanya, who still joins us in the studio. Thank you, ABISOLA. Okay. Well, we definitely watched that report there. And we know that in our earlier conversations, we were also talking about the fact that quality must obviously be very important to the state government as it pertains to agriculture. And naturally, although we've acknowledged that the primary focus is obviously piggeries, poultries and fisheries, there's also a role crops and harvests play in agriculture. And similarly, we have to understand that making sure that these crops maintain a certain level of quality is of importance. So when we look at cold chain systems, there's obviously a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that the residents here in the southern part of Nigeria, here in Lagos, aren't always having to pay far more for goods because of the distance they have to travel. What plans do you have to address those concerns?
So in as much as I might have mentioned that the focus for the enterprise activation program for this year cuts across poultry, piggery, and aquaculture fisheries. These were the value chains chosen because of the agitation, especially from the stakeholders of those particular livestock chains and what have you. And they were badly hit from last year, COVID-19 pandemic, and then the outbreak of the diseases. It doesn't mean that we don't have focus on, let's say, like the red meat value chain or the rice value chain. We're building the largest rice mill in Africa. Obviously, we have to have a lot of strategy adoption around how that mill is also going to work. And then when you consider other value chains, let's say like the tomato value chain or vegetables value chain as a whole, which is where cold chain logistics or solutions are also heavily required, then it goes to show that we will definitely put in a lot of effort into ensuring that Lagosians pay less as opposed to what is currently happening. So if I use tomato as an example, Lagosians consume almost 800,000 tons of tomatoes on an annual basis. We don't produce that much here in Lagos, but what ends up happening is more than half of those tomatoes get here not in good condition or in good quality, almost rotten, and Lagosians end up paying 3 to 4 times more than the average Nigerian for the same crop or for the same goods. Now, what we have fashioned out is we put out an expression of interest from, I think, April itself, just to show to the private sector that we're looking for some level of partnership where we would have private sector investors come into the space, work with us to ensure that at least we're able to produce more. So, for instance, we'll be setting up the greenhouse estates, Lagos State Greenhouse Estates, and the idea is to have a cluster of farmers who would be within an area where we could set up greenhouses, where we could have collaborations even with the government of Netherlands, for instance, since they're very good at greenhouse technology, and to be able to ensure that we adopt such technology on a large scale, as opposed to having farmers just across Lagos where you cannot actually handhold people. So for that sort of project, for instance, it will help us to galvanize production to levels such that we could also begin to make an impact in our markets. For other crops like vegetables, and when I mean vegetables, maybe cucumber and what have you, the same technology adoption is what we are looking at. So greenhouse technology definitely is the way to go. And with greenhouse technology, you definitely don't even need to make it completely horizontal, which is where land constraints can come in. You could go vertical, which is being done in other climes like in Singapore and in Netherlands itself, where land is no longer a constraint. It's now a function of how high you can go, and it could also be soilless farming, which is where the technology adoption also comes in and makes it more attractive for the youth to want to explore options and alternatives in agriculture. So these are the things that as a government under Mr. Babajide Olusola Sanwo-Olu we are working on. And I remember when you mentioned that we are more focused on techpreneurs and now we are going to agripreneurs. There's also a merger between tech and agric. So what we also have under the LASTRIC, which is the Lagos State Research Innovation Council, is agripreneurs who are also bringing tech solutions to the fore and using it on a large scale. So a lot of that you'll be seeing from this year forward till next year, and we obviously hope that the youth will take the lead in changing the face of agriculture in Lagos State. Okay,
let me just quickly ask you this, maybe a two-in-one question, just a quick one. Okay. Where are you as far as the Immortal Rice Mill is concerned? Because that's a beautiful example of continuity, in government, started by the previous administration, and you continue. I know that you were meant to finish in the first quarter of this year. Where are you there? And then what is the situation with the lake rice? Has it been suspended? No. Then if you cannot quickly add to it, the Mile 12 market, is it still moving?
Okay, so so for the for the Immortal Rice Mill, obviously we should have handed over at least or commissioned end of first quarter of this year. But there were a lot of challenges, obviously, because of COVID-19 pandemic. There were delays here and there, and then also a bit of constraints around release of funds for us to quickly finish. So it's not a function of, and don't forget, we are utilizing the CBN's Anchor Borrowers CACS loan, which is a commercial agri credit scheme. So obviously there's some protocol around that before funds can also be released. When Mr. Babajide Olusola came into governance or into administration, obviously that mill was around, I think, 10 to 15% completed. But as we speak to you today, it's about 90% completed. And what we have right now is just to move towards finishing the remaining 10% and then moving to pre-commissioning phase by September in itself. So what we have, this year. So I mean, you can visit the mill and see the state of the mill yourself. I don't think we'll restrict anyone from going there, but the mill will definitely be completed in terms of the putting together of the equipment and what have you, at least by September of this year. And then with regards to the commissioning itself, Mr. Governor even mentioned it on Thursday, at least by the end of this fourth quarter of this year, we should actually have the mill churning out rice. So obviously due to the delays, like I mentioned earlier, which is why we have some constraints and we have delays around the mill. Now, for the Lake Rice project, it's not like it's been suspended. The agreement with Kebbi from the get-go was, right now, we don't have a mill or a capacity for a mill that, can churn out the quantity of rice that Lagos requires. Kebbi is obviously one of the states that produces rice on a large scale. Absolutely. So the idea was Kebbi would produce and then Lagos would receive and distribute for sale. The idea is, as we also put our mill together, that dynamic is now going to change, where Kebbi now gives us the paddy and we process, since we have the largest processor.
The initiative is still on.
The initiative is still on, exactly.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
ABISOLA Olusanya, thank you very much, Honorable Commissioner for Agriculture here in Lagos State. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.